Hi, I'm Marcus, and welcome to the License to Kill podcast, where pest control professionals meet cutting edge expertise, industry insights, and a whole lot of camaraderie. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting your journey as a PMP, this podcast dives into everything that makes our industry tick. From advanced techniques and groundbreaking products to hilarious field stories and the real talk about the challenges we face in our industry. Join us as we explore the science, art, and community behind pest control, celebrating the people who work tirelessly to keep our world safe, healthy, and pest-free. As always, stay sharp, stay connected, stay legendary. Let's start the show.
And an invite to AJ here, see if he wants to hop in here, tell us a little bit about some of his rodent content or his rodent material. In the meantime, while he's gathering himself, I'll take a second to kind of celebrate a rodent victory that I had today earlier. I'm out on route, and I've got this account that I've been going to 3 days a week to perform rodent control at three very large properties, a lot of tenants, and they have some crazy, unusual, conducive conditions, circumstances. There was a large amusement park in our area that got decommissioned years ago, and they had like 50, 60 acres worth of parking lot and amusement park concrete that got ripped up and torn apart. And they just brought it over to a nearby concrete recycling company and stacked it up in like a 6-story tall buildings worth of just concrete rubble. Um, and not small crushed concrete. We're talking about blocks, some of these things the size of cars, some of these things the size of a person. And so all of these stacked up blocks and rebar has created just a labyrinth of tunnels and a labyrinth of nesting and harborage. And then, of course, it's been years and years and years since this has all occurred. And now grass has grown up on the backside of this small urban mountain, if you will. And so, of course, there's insects, there's grass seeds, there's everything that would be needed for um, these rodents to grow in large numbers. But uh, of course, these nearby properties, they have, like I said, lots of tenants, and so therefore lots of trash issues. And so it's taken years of going through different managers who, and porter teams, maintenance teams, who weren't serious about tackling the problem, weren't serious about getting the building structure up to snuff as it was. But we've used everything at this facility, from trapping to fertility control to rodenticides. And like I said, I've pulled easily 10, 20, 20 rodents per building out of these places for years, years now. And so this past renewal on our trapping program, things had finally gotten quiet. We got the guys to take it serious. They've shut down the trash rooms entirely, sanitized the 4-story tall trash chutes from the top to bottom. It's now squeaky clean in there, which used to consistently just be a wet, sopping, trashy muck. Uh, and that's now finally clean. And so things have really kind of taken a turn. Their reporters are going around like 3 days a week and picking up trash, or not 3 days, 3 days, 3 times a day, picking up trash from all the tenants. And so yeah, like I said, after 1,500 plus rodents and 2 years, we're all kind of high fiving and celebrating amongst our management because we finally gotten a little resolution of that. So that's kind of a good way to kickstart our deal here. AJ, you got your microphone figured out there, buddy?
I got everything all figured out. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Well, then I'm going to go ahead and mute myself because I am outside. There's trucks. Of course, I'm out here in the field, and so I'll just let you carry it away, and then I'll chime in with some good questions from here and here.
Right. So the first thing that I want to make sure that we understand is mice and rats are two different things, which we only got a handful of people in here, and I'm sure every person in here knows that. But the first thing you need to explain to your customers, probably half the time, is that they are different. I've had to explain to multiple people that mice do not grow up to be rats. That's not their childhood goal. The other thing that we need to acknowledge is that mice, while they are mammals, are biologically different than us. So we all know that we have calcium in our teeth and our bones. That's what makes them hard. Rodents have actual iron in their teeth. So when we talk about rats, they are supervillains. They can chew through concrete, they can chew through wood. Mice can definitely chew through wood, as I'm sure we've all noticed. Rodentis, which is where we get rodent from, literally means to chew. If you are not doing exclusion work with actual exclusion material, I'm talking trash about the people who walk around with cans of foam, you are not doing good pest control. You need to have steel wool or copper mesh on hand almost 100% of the time to make sure you're doing proper pest control. And we can't rely overly much on rodenticides. And I'm sure we all know somebody who lives in a state that is about to go through a rodenticide ban, or at least a second generation rodenticide ban. Make sure you are not specifically relying on anticoagulants to solve all your problems, and do not be the person who just puts tracking powder all over anything, because I think we all also know the old guy who's been doing this forever, who doesn't get scabs because they use Rosol 30 times a day. Make sure
Oh yeah,
exclusion is
I've actually seen
routine.
recently retail ZP pack tracking powder. There's been images floating around in some of the different social groups. That stuff really is. I mean, it's a restricted use product. That we need to be very, very careful about using those kinds of products, and when they're deployed, be very strategic about it. It's not a product to just throw around.
100%. And we need to keep in mind that I just said that while rodents are biologically different than us, we are all still mammals. Anticoagulants affect us the same way that they affect them. So please practice safety when you're using even just your little rodenticide packs. Don't be that jabroni that has them in their cargo pants pocket, bleeding blue or purple all over your leg. Be safe with this stuff and don't rely on it too much. Trapping and exclusion probably work better 90% of the time anyways. You are not going to solve a rodent issue on the inside by putting a bunch of boxes full of poison on the outside.
That makes a lot of sense.
So
Let me ask you, one of the things that we hear technicians tend to toss around to each other are, other attractants than your typical baits, right? Loose bits of string, bits of cotton, nesting material, um, you know, uh, other non-traditional. I think earlier you mentioned using ketchup and applesauce, those little go-go squeezes. Can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, is it comical that every one of us is out here using peanut butter? I know it's good practice that peanut butter does work, but is there better practice?
I'm from a generation that understands allergies, but if you're on the older side, you might be prone to saying, back in my day, nobody was allergic to peanuts. It doesn't matter anymore. There are people who are allergic to nuts, and you're never going to look awful being considerate of those people. Like, and the reason I try to steer away from Slim Jims is, again, trying to be considerate. There are people who have ethical or religious reasons why they might not want meat in their home. Because I know a bunch of people who
Right.
use Slim Jims. Like, pork product is taboo to Islamic folks and Jewish folks, and beef products is taboo to people who practice Hinduism. So ketchup is
Well, and
already
I did service at a food manufacturing facility that was quite very large, and there were major allergen concerns. So when we had to tackle some rodent issues out there, peanut butter was completely banned on site. Like we weren't even allowed to bring the stuff in the facility. Um, so like you said, those allergens, they on a residential level they may not seem important, but it is important to know your bait matrices and those allergens, because some of these facilities out here it does matter, and it is a part of their risk assessment.
100%. And that, again, nobody's ever going to be upset with you for being too concerned about making sure you're doing things correctly. So, and again, if anybody didn't read the paragraphs I wrote, I don't blame you. I won't read a paragraph a stranger wrote either. But so 1 second, I got to mute my other class real quick.
All right, okay.
I'm in the middle of teaching a termite class, and they're coming back. So, okay, sorry about that. So the thing we need to take into consideration is, again, we're all mammals. We see apples, lemons, limes. Those are brightly colored, and that appeals to us visually. That tells our brain this is nutritiously valuable. I don't think this should be too racy to say, but we evolved from creatures that ran across savannas to catch gazelle and deer. We need to be able to run all day. Same with mice. They need to be able to keep moving. So they see these bright colored, sugary things. It triggers the same part of the brain as it does for us, which is why I like the ketchups. It's bright red, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's actually a really good point.
The other side of it is, I think anybody who's done this for a while has noticed that most pests' favorite flavor of anything is liquid garbage. And again, that's ketchup.
Yeah, yes, yes. There's definitely a smell to day old ketchup that reminds you of the trash can, doesn't it?
Yes. But
So,
I apologize.
have
We do
you
have to
have
cut out
you?
real quick. This was really impromptu for me. I definitely want to do this again, but y'all have a spectacular day. I got to go talk about termites.
Yeah, take it easy, man. Have a good one.
Awesome.
Let me go ahead and pull
Thanks,
Mikey on here. Looks like he's got his request to speak. There we go.
Hello.
Welcome in, Mikey. Welcome in.
What's up, bro? So that being said, with the whole liquid garbage thing, and I know this is going to sound kind of stupid and nasty, then, but what about like, could you use something like, say, like old chicken juice, right? If you're defrosting a bunch of chicken, putting it into like a syringe or something, and or whatever, like, and using like the liquid from that, could you do something like that?
Well, I don't think the idea is to make trash juice or to make trash attractant per se. Is more or less that trash itself is just an abundance of nutrient resources, and those rodents can smell it, right? And so that's why they're just drawn to it. Really, I think it'd be better to just mimic what the bait source is, right? Or the original food source that they're already eating on, right? So sometimes, introducing a new food source like peanut butter or ketchup works, and you can, especially like some of the more odorous products, that they're able to draw them into the traps. But sometimes it doesn't work. If you're in an area that is like a trash room or trash chute, where you have an abundance of competing food sources, abundance of competing odors, that are making it difficult for the rodents to find your traps or for them to eat off your traps, then I've been told dozens of times, find what they're eating and then put that on your traps. If they broke into someone's office desk and they're chewing on cookies, use the cookies. Use the cookie crumbs, the leftover cookie package to bait the rodent, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't think the goal is to necessarily make trash, but we can definitely utilize trash. And the trash that's on hand is oftentimes your best friend, right? And it gives a lot of information, a lot of data about, what are these rodents eating? What are they lacking in their diet? That what they're going after is a good indicator of things that are going on in the population as far as the rodents' general overall needs, right? What's being met, what's not being met. Now, sometimes it might be a little hard to see that, on a one-off occurrence, but if you go to a place regularly, or you're dealing with rodent issues regularly, you're using multiple different baits on a variety of different traps, and you're noticing some traps working more effectively, or some baits working more effectively than others. There's a lot of data and a lot of information hidden into that. all of that can definitely be utilized.
That makes sense.
So, Mikey, you've been doing exclusion work for a little while now. And that means you get to see all kinds of damage, all kinds of entry points, in some really inaccessible areas. Um, can you talk about a time when you came across a very difficult to reach spot and how you were able to get equipment or devices into that area, or maybe you had like a particularly challenging exclusion? Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
A lot of times, some of the more difficult ones you'll end up having are some of those really tight, low angle roof returns, where just the nature of the equipment that you're using. I had one that was a really deep recessed, low, shallow angle roof return that was probably only like a 15, 20-degree roof return, but it was so shallow I couldn't even get the long foam gun back up in there. So, having to go into the attic and then go across the beams and weasel your way on your stomach to go all the way across to find where that roof return is in the attic is and seal it up from the inside is something that can be extremely challenging because obviously safety there with all the nails and stuff like that, and it makes it really difficult. There's that, and then breezeways as well. You go into a garage, and especially here in Texas, we've got a lot of houses are joined garages where they have that huge breezeway coming across. And it takes so much to seal up that breezeway. And just in terms of material, so whether you're using the quarter-inch hardware cloth, plus you're using your expansion foam and everything like that, and you're having to seal, anywhere from 6 to 10 to 12 joists and entry points above the garage, because a lot of the garages are unfinished. You can see the studs, you can see the supports. So I had one where I was actually able to go into the breezeway, and it was wide enough for me.
Oh wow! Literally crawl up in there.
Yeah, and crawl all the way back through the breezeway to where it met the house. And when I got back there, the hole was only about 3 inches wide.
Oh wow! Yeah, right. So what looked like this massive, material problem, right? Really, if you just dig a couple layers deeper, the real entry point, the actual entry point,
the actual entry point is much more manageable. And other than the fact that I'm not the smallest guy in the world, but trying to weasel your way through a breezeway and get over there, it's not feasible for a lot of people. But we have people that work with us, that are smaller frame, they're skinnier, they're slimmer. Being able to get to some of those spots, are beneficial. And at least with our company, we don't do a lot of inspections or going underneath pier and beam houses where we're crawling around in Tyvek suits. We don't really do that. Some of our inspectors do, some don't.
Yeah, but our entomologist a minute ago pointed out, making sure that you're using something that can really combat those rodent incisors, right? Do you feel like do you guys carry around copper mesh or steel wool or anything of that nature? I know you mentioned your phone kind of took a jab at that.
So there's a couple different things. So there's the hardware cloth, there's your expansion foam. But there's also, having steel wool with you, or even on top of that, having rolls of aluminum siding or galvanized aluminum.
Rolls of aluminum siding.
Yeah,
to do a little bit more of a thorough actual repair.
Yeah. Now, that being said, you would figure that metal would stop them from chewing through it, but I mean, I had one house that we took care of that I went back a week later for the follow up, and some bionic squirrel or whatever ripped through the aluminum.
Well, our friend did say they could chew through concrete, they could chew through metal, they could chew through, just about anything. You really do have to. I've seen products like Excluder. Have you ever got a
Yeah.
chance to use Excluder?
No, I haven't.
It's a pain to handle. You have to have the gloves that come with it, or at least some pretty decent gloves to handle it, or it'll tear your fingers up. But it's a like dense plastic, like kind of sharp mesh that's embedded with like steel wool all throughout it. That I mean, you touch it, it just pricks your hand. It's kind of. Have you ever used those de-shedding combs for dogs
Yeah,
and
yeah,
cats?
yeah, yeah.
It's like that embedded in a bunch of plastic mesh. It comes in a roll.
Well, the biggest thing that you
Really
need to
good
think
product,
of is
actually.
you got to think about like what the rodent's doing, right? It's biting, it's chewing. So, you know, compounding multiple layers of defense when you're sealing up the hole, whether that's okay, I'm putting the coil stock and I've put my hardware cloth and I've put the foam there, you know, because the biggest thing is when they bite down into it, if they bite something and it stabs the roof of their mouth because it's sharp, they'll leave it alone, which is one of the reasons why you go with, something like a 1/4 inch hardware cloth as opposed to like a 1/2 inch, because that way that metal's a lot tighter to each other. Or using steel wool where it has those little bits of steel that are all wound through it.
So when you got to work at that retail store, you got to experience a lot of different products, everything from stuff like Propel, rodent repellent, and uh, urine, like predator urine and things like that.
Uh-huh.
We don't see a lot of companies using those kinds of products. Are they gimmicky? Do they work? Have you gotten any feedback from customers? Stuff like paprika, or oftentimes in the social media sites, you tend to see mint oil. Mint oil is the solution for everything.
I mean, some of it's gimmicky, some of it's not. I found that there were times that predator urine worked. You know,
Predator urine
but
is useful.
generally, predator urine worked better for uh, larger animals. Your raccoons, possums, things like that. It just seemed like rats didn't care when people were having a rat problem. Somebody would be like, "Yeah, throw some predator urine up there, and it'll get rid of them." And it's like that just doesn't work. Because they're used to living in refuse and garbage, around feces, around urine. I mean, yeah, they're prey animals, but I mean that's at least that's from my experience that predator urine doesn't really work as well on like mice and rats as opposed to doing something as a deterrent uh, for raccoons, opossums, things like that.
Now, there's a lot of traps that are out there on the market, right? Everything from uh, sorry. There's a lot of traps that are out there on the market, right? Everything from the old school Victor wooden snappies to the T-Rex stuff, and now this new smart sense kind of products, these electronic products. Um, what are your thoughts on that? What, like, is data important? Is cost effectiveness important? What like you're an end user. Of course, I'm going to have my own opinion. Everybody's going to have their own opinion, but you do a lot of exclusion work. What do you find in the traps world? What works best for you?
I mean, they all have their purposes, right? I mean, the Victor snap traps, the old school wooden snap traps. I mean, that's a staple. They're great. They're cheap. They work, right? But some people, I mean, even some of the technicians in the company that I work with are scared of them. They're scared of the bars. They're scared to get snapped on, and so they'll end up relying more on things like T-Rexes because they're safer. And being realistic, yeah, they are safer for the technicians to use because you're securing the back, right? You're not having to deal with an open bar that's tensioned down by springs. And I know some of us have like doubled up the springs or whatever to make something more efficient, but I think all of them have their place and all of them have their role. Some of the, whether you're using a mouse bait station or like a tunnel or something like that, you can't really put a snap trap in there, a wooden one, because the bar's too high and it won't go off right. But it'll fit a T-Rex because that's what they're designed for. Uh, you just got to be cognizant of the environment that you're putting them in. Where you're putting it at. Is there an access for small dogs, small children? Are they going to put their hand in there? Where are you placing things at? I think that each one of them has their uses, right? Just like where you have a certain product that you use for a certain pest, because it works well, or it may work better in a situation. It's the same thing when it comes to traps. You want to utilize the best trap for the situation that you're in. And the electronic ones have their place, definitely, especially for customers who don't want to see things. Having an electric trap out there that just has a light that lets you know whether or not it's gone off, or the ones that you can mount. There's ones that you can mount to trees or sides of houses that have a CO2 canister in there, that they stick their little head up there and they try and get the food, and then it fires a rod, drops them, and you have a pile of rodents. So those are great for barns, for people that don't necessarily care about dealing with a dead rodent, because they see stuff like that all the time. You just have to use the right trap for
So talk,
the right.
so talk to me like I was a day one tech for a minute, and you know, uh, how would you approach how would you approach the difference between a rat stop and a mouse stop? Right. What are things that you're going to be looking for? What's going to be a part of your inspection? What's your process?
So when I get to a stop and I'm looking for, what it is that I'm dealing with, obviously you're looking for how they're getting in, where are they getting in from, what are they eating, what's attracting them, why are they here, what are they doing. A lot of times it's food, other times it's harborage and nesting, and some of the times it's none of the above. It's especially some of the houses now that have the spray foam insulation. They may have something that tried to get in, got into the attic, and then there's no place for them to have that harborage. There's no insulation for them to burrow in and bury some food in. So they got in, they don't like it, they left. So figuring out the reason why they're there, what are they after, what are they using, and identifying whether it's identifying by droppings, or if you're lucky and you get a chance to see something scurry around when you climb up into the attic space or into the space where the activity's at. Kind of
So say you look in your notes on your stop and it says that they have mice activity. Where's the first place that you're going to go look at, or what does your inspection look like for mice?
So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk around the exterior of the house, because I'm going to be checking AC lines. I want to check roof returns. I want to check any way that's going to make the house open and vulnerable, right? So how are they getting in? So I'll check that out. Once you find that, then it just goes towards closing up those areas, literally excluding those areas off. The biggest culprit, and it's for everybody, is going to be the garage. Especially if the garage is attached to the house. The bottom corners of the garage, everybody can see. You go in the garage and you're doing your spray work, and you go in, you can see daylight coming clean as day through. Those are huge open spaces where rodents come in.
So how is that sealed up? How do you exclude those corners using the hardware cloth?
I mean, that's a relatively that varies based upon how big your gap is. How big that hole is, how big that entry point is. But generally, it's just molding hardware cloth to the shape and to the form of the outer framework of the garage door, and then drilling it in, securing it in, and then personally, I take a little bit of the expansion foam and fill in those gaps as well. Just you want to make sure you don't get it on the door.
So are there any kind of behavioral differences between mice and rats that affect your where you're looking or how you're doing your inspection?
For me, from what I've noticed, honestly, not really. But that's just for me from what I've from because I haven't done the world's most amount of exclusion work, but for me, it's the same thing. They're looking for harborage, they're looking for water, they're looking for food.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes a lot of sense. Um, so in our area, we deal with mostly roof rats. We have the occasional Norway rat, but we have a lot of black rat and roof rats, acrobat rat. They kind of go by a couple different names. Um, so it definitely feels like we deal with some very mobile rats. But there's a kind of a misconception there that Norways are limited to the ground or not as capable of maneuvering around a structure. And I've actually seen some pretty cool videos that say otherwise. Where Norway rats are getting into some very interesting places. They're getting into some elevated spaces. Now, generally, there's some trends, right? But I think one of the fun things as a technician that we learn is that as much as there's a textbook for everything and there's a correct way for everything, nobody ever gave the bug the memo. Nobody ever read the book to the rat, right? So rats don't care about your textbook, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And so sometimes that kind of curious situation will pop up, and you go, well, this isn't what I was told in training, and the limitations of that kind of trained mindset, and not remembering that, hey, you're dealing with a living organism here. You're dealing with an animal that's it's thinking, it's going to figure its way out of this problem, and they're very smart creatures.
Yeah, well, I mean, book training is only going to get you so far. Field experience is going to take you miles and miles above. Because just because it says something in the book doesn't mean that's exactly how it's always going to play out in the field. The book can give you, and that's not to say that book training or anything like that is bad, because in no way is it. It's really good and beneficial. But it's a baseline. It'll start you because you'll see some odd things out there. I didn't, like I said when I saw before about the squirrel that chewed through coil stock. I didn't realize that a squirrel could chew through metal.
Right.
But you get out in the field and you find out that it can. Surprise.
And you're finally presented with that situation. You go, well, there's very clearly a hole in that metal. Something chewed its way through there.
Right. So, use book training as a basis and a jump off point. And I'll say a lot of times, and like one of my downfalls is sometimes I'll overthink things. So stopping sometimes and thinking outside of the box and being like, okay, why, go back to the basics, go back to what the book says, and build from there based upon what you're seeing and what you're noticing and the environment you're in, and come up with a solution that way.
Being outside of the book and outside the box. Uh, you get out here in the field, everybody likes to talk about the time they did it great, the time they got it perfect, the time that solved all the problems. But if you've been doing this long enough, you've had your ass handed to you from time to time. Have you ever, or can you think of a time when you got humbled by a rat? Can you think of a time when maybe you did an exclusion and you just looked like a total fucking idiot, or did it? Can you tell me kind of a more of a funny story that reminds everybody that, hey, failure is a part of the process. It's okay to goof up. It's okay to not be perfect all the time. Those are learning lessons. So can you think of any of those learning lessons you've gotten along the way? Maybe one about good boots and not falling off of roofs.
Yeah, I mean, don't fall off roofs. That's a bad thing.
That's a bad thing, huh?
Uh, you know, that's one thing that I will say is if you are getting up on roofs and you're having to do this type of work, you know, safety is paramount. You know, whether it's taking cushions, having the Puma claws or whatever they're called for boots, have the right equipment when you're going up there. Whether you need to invest in it yourself because the company won't or the company isn't, if you're going to be doing that, you need to have the right equipment because you can get severely injured. I've gone off roofs. I've gone off 3 times. Twice off the same roof. I figured I would have learned the first time, but I was lucky. All 3 times. One time I went into a pool. The other 2 times were one story and went right into the grass. And so I was lucky. But if you get up there in the roof,
Let's refrain from talking bad about any particular entities, but let's talk about how did you end up in that situation, right? As an early exclusion tech, or maybe a tech, who's out there for the first time,
yeah.
what circumstances led to you falling off a roof twice in one service? Talk a little bit about that. Recap that story. What was happening?
Lack of training is a big thing. Hey, congratulations. We've got a really big stop on you. Go over here and go do it, and you're going to need a ladder to get up there. Okay, cool. If you've never done any roofing framework, any work on a roof, walking on a roof is a lot different than walking on the ground. It's a whole nother beast. It's a whole nother animal. And if you've never been trained to be up there and you've never learned how to walk across a roof, how to, stabilize yourself, how to move around, go up valleys, then you're up there in a very precarious situation. A lot of roofs are very brittle. The shingles will start to deteriorate, and you step on them, and then all those gravelly pieces start slipping out from underneath you, especially when you're on a high angle pitch. And when that starts happening, it can cause, internally, you can panic a little bit, because you're like, I'm, 20 feet up in the air, and now the roof is giving out from underneath me, and you'll start slipping and sliding. You've got to have training to be up in those areas. If they have training for enclosed spaces, there's training for being on a roof. You need to have the training. You need to have the proper equipment, because it very well can kill you. You can die by falling off a 6-foot ladder, a 6-foot A-frame ladder. You could fall and kill yourself. And I know we all make joke about stuff with like OSHA and safety and stuff like that. Who's going to fall off a 6-foot ladder? Well, it happens, and it does.
Yeah, and I kind of want to touch on another point too that and not to again it's not to kind of like put you on the spotlight or anything, right? But falling off the roof one time would have been enough to jar and stop people, 99% of most people in their tracks. You chose to get back up on the roof and keep going, and I have to believe a part of that is because we're all out here doing a job, right? This is how we make our living. This is how we make our work. And if you're not getting the job done, then you're not making your wages in some cases. Some people are hourly, but in some people it's not, right? And so, kind of talking about that human element, right? That, we're all out here trying to make it, and, not to say that like we're, if like we're desperate for money or whatever, but we need the money, we need the income that we're making, right? And so it's like, be mindful, like don't let your hunger for that next job payment, right, get blind you into doing something incredibly dangerous, right? Like,
well, that's exactly what it was. I'm commission based, right? And so that specific ticket that I went off the roof twice was a very large ticket. I was looking at, taking home, upwards of $800 to $900 off that stop. That's how big that ticket was. And one day for almost $1,000, that you're chasing that money. But if you don't get the job done, you don't get that. And it was literally what it boiled down to was I prioritized the money over my own safety because I went off once, and there was so many factors that I shouldn't have been up there. The roof was slightly wet. The roof was very poor condition. The roof needed to be replaced. It wasn't too long after we had a hurricane come through our area. The roof was damaged. The shingles were brittle. Everything was falling apart. The roof was still damp and wet. And I was prioritizing trying to get that paycheck so that way, I was making ends meet because I was in a financial tight spot at the time. Supporting a wife, a family on my own shoulders, and the economy isn't the best. So trying to chase that payday, essentially, I was risking myself, my livelihood, and went off the roof twice. And it was the first time I
And
went off.
$1,000, that can make or break a pay period. Hell, that is a pay period.
1,000%.
But
And
at
it,
the same
the
time,
first time I
though,
went off,
if
I
you'd have
turned
gone
around and
home,
climbed back up. Yeah, the first time I
yeah,
went
well,
off, I
if you'd have
climbed back
gone
up, and
home
I
in
was
a
like,
body bag,
"Whoa."
it would have cost your family a whole lot more than that $1,000. Would
Exactly.
have
And the
gained you.
other thing is too, a lot of us, depending on what we have and management and how we're routed, especially if you're not owning your own business or you're not you're not in that management level, you know, with a lot of companies and a lot of management, it's, oh, well, for some reason you weren't able to do it. I could do it. Why didn't you get it done? And then now all of a sudden you're not making that money. You're not getting those paychecks anymore. And now you are back on some light route where either you're viewed as a technician that can't get the job done, you're the guy that doesn't finish the work, or, oh, you just don't want to get up there and do it. And that's not the case. The fact was it was unsafe for me to be up there, but that's not
And
the
that's
way the management
oftentimes a
views it.
position many technicians find themselves pitted in between, doing what's right and doing what's safe versus, like you said, not wanting to get that bad reputation at work, or trying to fulfill and meet those financial pressures.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time since then, right? You've continued to climb on roofs since then. You've continued to make good money since then. Tell us a little bit about how you mustered up the resolve to, that when you're in those kind of incidences now, how do you react? What do you do? What did you learn from falling off that roof 2 times in a row? And how does that apply to your day to day now?
If it's sketch, I don't do it. Plain and simple,
Yeah.
and full period stop. And it's even compounded by the fact that, and I'll say this too: if you're on the roof and because you're up there where the wind's blowing and something starts catching something, let it go. Don't hold on to it. Let it go. Let it go. Let it fall. Let it go. Uh, I actually have a family member of my wife. She was on a roof trying to put some screens on a window. Wind caught the screen. She held onto it. It pulled her off the roof. She shattered both her legs, and she just got her legs amputated yesterday. Both of them.
Wow.
She's 20. She's 24 years old, and she was a dancer. Not anymore.
Oh my goodness. And
Hold
see
on one second.
those are the kind of the real horror stories that you hear about. I know we're able to kind of laugh now, about you falling off a roof twice, whatever. But damn, that puts it into perspective. Man, I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of share some of your experience. Show us the good sides, the proper side, but also showing us some of the dark side of what this stuff looks like and what it really can be like to be a technician out here in the field. Where things don't always go by the book, and it's not always the textbook example. I really appreciate you just kind of opening up, talking a little bit about that.
And I appreciate that. I mean, the biggest thing I can say, and if anybody takes anything away from this, the biggest thing is be safe. Your safety is paramount. Your safety is worth more than a paycheck. Your safety is everything because you are the one that has to live with your body the rest of not your company. It's nothing like that. It's not your company that has to worry about it. It's you. So prioritize your safety in whatever you're doing and however you're doing it. And if it's unsafe, don't do it. That's the biggest takeaway. Regardless of what somebody says, and regardless how management wants to come down on you over a situation, if it's unsafe, don't do it. And especially don't chase the money after it because $1,000 isn't worth you being crippled for the rest of your life.
No, and it is better to take the L and just be broke for a little bit. We're all hardworking people. We're in this industry. We wake up every day to put our boots on and go earn the next day's labors, the next day's wages. And, none of us are poor because none of us will allow ourselves to be chronically poor. It's okay if you hit that tough spot, maybe a bill gets put behind or, if that job is going to make or break your pay period, but at the same time, it's going to risk your safety. Don't be afraid to stand up to your boss. Don't be afraid to stand up to, and honestly, you should have, you should advocate for your bosses to be in your corner. A good boss will never push you to do something dangerous that you're not. I don't think, that we have, bosses that do that with us particularly, but, when you end up in those circumstances, and you really feel like you're, I don't want to say it too like hyperbolically, but you're fighting for your life, literally financially, and you're fighting for your safety, you're fighting for your well-being, and you're fighting for your family's life. And a good manager should be in your corner. A good manager should want you to go home safe every single day, and want to make sure that there's food on your table for you and your family. And if you're ever finding yourself, questioning whether your boss is got your best interest, communicate that up to their boss. Say something to somebody. Talk to your coworkers. Anything. Don't let that just be a silent situation. The last thing we want, there's not a lot of technicians out here. There's only 80,000 technicians in the entire United States. We can't afford to, be hurting ourselves or putting ourselves in harm for the almighty dollar. That's just not going to work.
Yeah. Exactly.
Man, I can't believe we've already almost killed an hour. It's already been about 48 minutes, 50 minutes into this talk. That's pretty awesome. Are there any, I know you don't get to endorse the product, but is there any kind of equipment or product that you really like best? What's your go-to stuff if you had to spend your own money on it?
As far as what, just exclusion stuff or just in general?
No, man, like your equipment, your boots. You talked about some special boots earlier. Are there any like roof tools, like a roof, like I heard you call it like a roof hopper or something. Are there any like tools to the trade? What's your tool?
Invest in a pitch hopper. Invest in the cougar paws, pitch hoppers, and if possible, find a way to get a harness. But I have to pop out of here to get to go take care of a stop. So I'm gonna step out from the stage, I guess.
Oh, that's fine, man. I think we're actually going to go ahead and bring it to a wrap. It's kind of an impromptu rodent session today. Unless anybody else wants to, request to speak, hop in here. If not, I think we'll go ahead and call it for the evening or for the chat here. And y'all, thank you so much for joining in. Thanks for hanging out with us. And be sure to have a blessed day. Take it easy, Mike.
Bye.
Give it another minute or two here. See if anybody wants to pop in. In the meantime, I talk a little bit about some rodent experiences that I've had. I'm thinking of this veterinarian clinic one time that at a surgical center, and they had conduit that went through the floor where rodents had been nesting under the slab of this building, the shopping center, and majority of the shopping center ended up getting gutted out. They cleaned, they gutted the walls, they gutted the floor, and all that was left was the end of the shopping center where this particular veterinarian clinic was at. And they had gotten so overran by the time I came on scene that the metal dog cages where they keep the animals after surgeries and for observation and stuff, the kennels had pink insulation from the roof, from the drop ceiling, stuffed behind the cages like almost like a 6-inch wall about 4 feet tall, where and it wrapped down and underneath the bottom sides of these cages where they had created a whole labyrinth of tunnels inside the insulation and were using that to network their way over to the dog food storage area. And they were busting into this very expensive dog food, veterinarian prescribed dog food or whatever, that they were just getting into, and they were tearing up bags or tearing up retail, and obviously making the place very unsanitary. And that was a pretty wild experience, coming in and seeing rats coming from the top, coming from the bottom. They were hanging out inside the building, and it was so strange because they weren't, they weren't bothered by the smell of all of these cats and dogs and people, and those circumstances didn't really seem to bother the rodents. They were happy to be there anyways, and so we end up deploying. Of course, I know all of the entomologists out there in the world are going to hate, the rodenticide. I understand that, the controversy behind it, but history is history, and the fact is, what we used at that location was a product called Rodent Thor that had a desiccant in it to help out to dry out the rodents when they die. That's what they're told. I'm not entirely certain of that. Hopefully, the truth. And we ended up having to do some pretty major exclusion work. Some rodent baiting. I put out several traps in the drop ceiling, and about a week into it, man, it was just like we got total colony collapse, but there were flies everywhere. It was like the craziest fly infestation I'd ever seen in my entire life, and and so we ended up making a pretty good penny on the fly. But once we knew we had gotten to the fly portion, right? We knew that okay, we're there's some things dying here. We're starting to really gain some traction. So we went and removed all the dead animals that we could find. We did odor control, we did fly control, and we got that facility resolved in under a month. It was a couple weeks. I think 2 or 3 visits, maybe 3 or 4 total, with the consultation and everything. And this forward clinic had been plagued with these rats for like 2 years, and they just couldn't get their technician that they had to be aggressive enough to really throw enough at the problem that they would come in and put one little bait block down. They had like two boxes on this building, and that's all they were doing. It's like, oh well, you can't seem to figure it out. It's like sometimes you got to be willing to unload the arsenal when it calls for it. So that's kind of I started with a rodent story. I finished with a rodent story. I'm not really seeing anybody else want to pop in here and request to speak, so I think we're going to go ahead and call it here at 54 minutes, 55 minutes. Y'all be sure to have a blessed one. Thank you so much for joining the Pest Talk, and I'll see you guys over in the field shenanigans.
Thanks for tuning into the Licensed Kill Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful, informative, and engaging. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe to your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. It really helps us to reach more listeners like you. Have a question or a topic that you'd like us to cover in a future episode? Connect with us through our Facebook, YouTube, and most importantly, our Discord. Until next time, this is your host, Marcus, reminding you to stay sharp, stay legendary, and stay connected.